Welcome everyone, I'm Adam Livingston. Some of you know me as the Bitcoin Wizard. Long before I was tormenting fiat economists on X and YouTube, I was the weird libertarian kid in high school. I remember distinctly being in my high school study hall just tearing into The Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek. Mr. Friedrich here is an absolute legend. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. It is a masterpiece of political philosophy. So now reading this book and others, they did not give me social points, but it did give me a lifelong allergy to centralized control. So Hayek published his warning in 1944 while bombs were still falling in Europe. He watched governments seize command of entire economies, and he noticed a pattern. And that pattern was, once officials manage the marketplace, they start managing everything else: your speech, your movement, and even your thoughts. Freedom becomes a privilege handed out on Tuesdays unless there is a holiday. So fast forward to 2025, central banks are expanding their balance sheets faster than influencers expand their sponsorship links. Politicians argue about how to spend money that was created 5 minutes ago. The promise hasn't changed a bit. Concentrated economic power breeds political power, and that combination overrides individual choice every single time. So how does this relate to Bitcoin, you might ask? Well, no boardroom sets its monetary policy. No central authority reverses its transactions, and no politician dictates who can join the network. Bitcoin is voluntary at every layer. For anyone who paid attention to Hayek's lessons, teenage me included, that is not a tech fad, it is the practical response to an old problem. So today I'm going to connect Hayek's insights to Bitcoin's design, show why they align perfectly, and explain how opting into this Bitcoin network is the clearest way to keep personal and economic freedom on speaking terms. Hayek spent hundreds of pages showing a straightforward cause of effect that almost every civilization keeps forgetting. So I'm going to trace that chain step by step in clear language so nobody leaves with hand-waving excuses. Step 1 is that economic control always accompanies political control. When a ministry sets production quotas, subsidies, and price ceilings, it also decides whose choices count. Voters still cast ballots, but their practical options shrink because the real decisions already sit in the plan. History gives many examples, from Soviet 5-year plans to wartime ration boards. Every time the state directs resources, it quietly directs the citizens. And you also have to remember that liberty will always erode incrementally over time. And that's because regulations arrive one justification at a time. The government will say war, recession, a pandemic, housing. Sound familiar? Each rule will feel temporary and targeted, yet the cumulative result is permanent and broad. Over decades, people then adapt to the shrinkage of liberty, often without noticing the moments when permission replaced freedom. And then the next step is the knowledge problem. Prices are not arbitrary numbers, they are compressed messages that reflect scarcity, preference, and opportunity across millions of minds. A committee cannot gather all the information in real time, much less adjust fast enough to new data. So when central planners replace market prices with directives, they literally blind themselves. Scarcity still exists, but now it strikes through queues, shortages, or black markets instead of honest signals. And then come the predictable political consequences. So once the plan fails to hit any sort of targets that they set, the planners just reach for stronger measures. Rationing becomes confiscation, the propaganda becomes censorship, and policing expands to monitor ordinary exchange. Hayek did not speculate about this outcome. He was observing it in Germany, Italy, the Soviet Union, and he saw signs in Britain and the United States during wartime mobilization. So many of his readers in 1944 believed that universal suffrage would neutralize all of these dangers. And Hayek answered that the administrators, the central planners, the elite with sweeping economic authority do not need overt tyranny. So if they control hiring, credit, procurement, and licensing, they can influence people's careers, the media outlets, and the cultural institutions. And everybody everybody feels this on kind of a primal level, but they don't really say it out loud. The elections change faces, but they never change the incentives. So keep these steps in mind as we turn to Bitcoin. Economic freedom and personal freedom rise and fall together. A monetary system that operates without central approval removes the first lever of coercion. Bitcoin does not promise utopia. It simply takes the hardest tool of control, which is discretion over money creation. It takes it out of political hands and places it inside open source code that anyone may inspect, but nobody may override. So understanding Hayek's lessons prepares us to see why that structural change matters. So now that we have seen how Hayek traced the chains that tie economic control to personal control, now let us examine an economic system that breaks every one of those chains. First is that Bitcoin's monetary policy is hard written into publicly visible code. There will never be more than 21 million coins. The issuance schedule lives in the software, not in a committee memo. And every 4 years, the subsidy per block drops by half. Anyone can run the code on hardware that costs less than a weekend vacation, verify the rules, and confirm that the schedule remains intact. And also, tens of thousands of independent nodes keep real-time copies of the ledger. Each node validates every transaction and every block against the consensus rules. So if a proposed block violates a rule, the node just discards it. No single operator can override the network. The consensus emerges because the honest nodes follow the same rulebook. Dishonest actors receive silence in response. And the security comes from proof of work. The Bitcoin miners convert computational effort and electricity into hash power, competing to append the next block. So the cost of rewriting history scales with the energy required to match the cumulative work. So this turns the economic attack cost into an objective figure rather than a political negotiation. Remember, inflation targets at a central bank just change with a committee vote, but Bitcoin's security budget changes only with market competition. More evidence that Bitcoin is the only free market that exists in society. Fourth, the governance is totally voluntary, so software clients are free and open source, so anyone can audit, fork, or propose improvements. A change activates only when users upgrade their own machines. This prevents unilateral edits to rules. The coordination problem returns to the individual level, satisfying Hayek's demands that decisions rest with the people who bear the consequences. So then, the price discovery happens in open markets. It's 24 hours a day, transparent to anyone with an internet connection. The supply is fixed, the demand adjusts minute by minute, and the price transmits information without interference from capital controls, or interest rate committees, or open market operations. So Bitcoin, therefore, embodies Hayek's core insight in silicon and cryptography. It distributes knowledge through transparent price signals. It forbids discretionary monetary expansion. It lets individuals opt in or out without asking permission. The same incentives that keep the ledger honest also keep the central planners away, preserving the space where economic freedom and political freedom reinforce each other. Hayek argued that no committee can gather the real-time knowledge dispersed among millions of individuals. Bitcoin neutralizes this problem by letting the knowledge coordinate itself. First, every pending transaction lives in the mempool, an open queue visible to anyone that's running a node. Users broadcast what they are willing to pay in fees, and then the miners sort those bids by economic value. So the mempool therefore becomes a live spreadsheet of global demand, updated each second without an information ministry. And then the difficulty adjustments calibrates supply to match that demand. The protocol measures how fast blocks arrived. If miners have added hash power, difficulty rises. If hash power falls, the difficulty drops. The network therefore self-regulates the pace of issuance with a precision no central bank can replicate. No votes, no lobbying, just math. Third, price signals reach entrepreneurs without barriers. Developers notice fee spikes and build batching tools, SegWit upgrades, or lightning channels. Wallet designers react to usability bottlenecks in hours, not quarters. And each innovation is permissionless. You publish code, you convince users, and the market decides. The victorious solutions are the ones that save time, reduce cost, or lower risk for real people. And then you need to remember that this coordination production scales horizontally rather than vertically. A node in Nairobi, Kenya, a lightning router in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and a mining farm in West Texas all follow the exact same rulebook, yet they all pursue their own incentives. The outcome is a constantly updating ledger that reflects the priorities of its participants without asking any one of them to predict or plan for the others. So finally, the knowledge problem is resolved not by better forecasts, but by eliminating the need for the forecasts. The rules stay fixed while actors adjust locally and instantly. The protocol never tries to guess optimal block size, or the exchange rate, or the settlement volume. It's simply enforcing honesty and letting the collective experiment produce all the answers. And Mr. Hayek here called this spontaneous order the hallmark of a free society. Bitcoin turns the concept into executable code, proving that economic coordination can be both global and permissionless without sacrificing accuracy or fairness. So here is the economic scoreboard in plain numbers. In August 2007, the Federal Reserve held about $870 billion in assets. Today, the balance sheet sits near $6.6 trillion. At the pandemic peak in early 2022, it reached $8.9 trillion. That is an expansion of roughly 7 to 10 times less in less than 2 decades. Each dollar created dilutes the purchasing power of every dollar already saved. The voters rarely approve these issuances. The process runs through bond auctions and accounting entries that few citizens ever read. Bitcoin operates obviously on the opposite principle. The supply schedule was fixed in January 2009 and will never change. The block subsidy started at 50 coins every 10 minutes, dropped to 25 in 2012, 12.5 in 2016, 6.25 in 2020, and 3.25 in 2024. Fewer than 1.3 million coins remain to be mined. The final coin will emerge around the year 2140, bringing the total to 21 million, and anyone can audit this schedule with a single line of code. So consider the behavioral incentives. When supply is elastic, the political coalitions will lobby for new issuance to fund projects or rescue troubled industries. The costs disperse through inflation while the benefits concentrate in the hands of the recipients. When the supply is inelastic, no coalition can conjure up extra units, so funding must come from voluntary exchange only or explicit taxation. The discipline shifts from rhetoric to arithmetic. And then purchasing power follows the exact same logic. The United States inflation averaged about 2.5% annually over the past 20 years, higher in recent spikes. Those are fake numbers, but still we're going to roll with it. A saver holding Bitcoin absorbs price volatility, yet the long-term supply-side risk is zero because the supply growth trends towards zero. Hayek literally taught that planning authorities inevitably expand their reach when money creation is easy. Bitcoin removes that lever entirely. It cannot be printed for war bonds, stimulus checks, or corporate bailouts. The monetary discretion disappears, and with it, a primary channel through which economic control feeds political control. The choice is clear. Hold a currency whose supply can rise by trillions without a single voter's signature, or hold a currency whose supply is written into open source code and verified by every participant on the network. We've compared 2 monetary architectures. One is managed by committees that can expand the supply, overwrite contracts, or allocate credits by decree. The other operates on rules that anyone can audit, yet no one can bend. Only one of these systems align with incentives from Hayek's vision of individual liberty. So here's what choosing Bitcoin looks like in practice. Number 1, you gotta self-custody. Download a wallet that lets you hold your keys. The moment that you control those keys, you remove counterparty risk. No bank holiday. Then there's verification. Run a full node on a low-power computer. You will validate every block yourself, becoming a sovereign checkpoint in the network. Knowledge replaces trust. And then there's education. Study the principles that connect Bitcoin to Austrian economics. Read Hayek, read Mises, read Rothbard, then compare their arguments to the code that you just verified. Theory and implementation reinforce each other. Contribute where your skills fit. Developers can review pull requests, translators can localize documentation, Designers can improve user interfaces. Each contribution strengthens the protocol without waiting for permission. If you know about Bitcoin, do your part, choose your lane, and help out. Explain to friends and colleagues that monetary sovereignty is a civil right. Show them how a transparent, predictable supply protects the time that they exchange for income. None of these steps require marching in the streets or asking legislators for favors. Each one is a voluntary action that amplifies the network effect and shrinks the sphere where coercive monetary policy can operate. Hayek warned that drifting towards centralized control leads to a loss of freedom at every level. Bitcoin offers a concrete working alternative. By opting in, you convert abstract defense of liberty into daily practice. The next move is yours, and it starts with a single private key. My name is Adam Livingston. I am the Bitcoin Wizard. If you enjoyed this content, please share it with your friends and family. Spreading the orange gospel is extremely important in this day and age. Have a terrific day. Class dismissed.